Okay, thanks to everyone for coming along today. So we're here because we're celebrating the 5th anniversary of the launch of Methods in Ecology and Evolution. This is it's fantastic to be at this point. 5 years ago we were just launching the journal, didn't know if it would work, didn't know if there would be an audience, and weren't even sure that we'd be here in 5 years' time. So to be here and to have this opportunity to celebrate what we've done is absolutely fantastic. I don't want to say too much at this point, so we've got a set of talks lined up which designed really to illustrate the breadth of stuff that we're interested in and we try to publish. So we've got a range of speakers who are going to give some talks, talking about some stuff on statistics, stuff on monitoring, molecular methods, really trying to demonstrate the breadth of stuff that we publish and that we're interested in doing, and hopefully showing that we're trying to promote a range of methods across the remit of ecology and evolution. We're going to be live streamed today, so we're hopefully giving the chance for people across the globe to see the symposium. If I was a speaker, that would make me really nervous. So thank you to all the speakers for absorbing this extra level of pressure. It's very much appreciated. So I'm not going to say anything more apart from to introduce our first speaker today, who's Bill Sutherland. Bill's the president of the British Ecological Society, and we're really grateful that he's made time to give a talk. And also, Bill's been a regular contributor to the journal right from the start, so has a number of papers now with us which are really well thought of and really well cited. So I'll hand over to Bill for the first presentation.
I'm the warm-up act. I'd like to sort of talk about a range of different approaching methods and some ideas of how you could sort of tie that together. So Aristotle started off a lot of science. He didn't really have any methods for monitoring, and as a result basically got everything wrong. Linnaeus came along. Linnaeus started the whole business of collecting and cataloguing, and had a huge impact. Collecting specimens became really important. There's some practical problems with this, as shown that once you've collected your first Corey bustard, it's kind of hard to go and collect any more on that particular day. But that obviously has practical difficulties. We then start having photography, so you can then start recording things. Here, the wonderful Kearton brothers with their portable photographic kit. You can carry it around. You can put it in hides. Here they had a hide made out of a stuffed sheep, or another one with a cow. It's a real pity that we discovered you didn't need that. I was thinking, what would bird watching be like nowadays if, or Titchwell, if it was like that. This is what the bank at Titchwell would have been like if we hadn't learnt that we didn't need that stuff. Anyway, but there are other problems with that system. It's not easy to use. Then we started developing field guides. Here's the Fitter and Richardson. And as a child, I saw one of these in my local park and went had a look in this book and found it. It's a Chinese goose, or swan goose. It's the only book I've ever seen that actually has that illustrated. As a result of that, I thought, oh, this is kind of cool, and took up bird watching, and that's probably why I'm here, because of that book. And we've had lots of other books since. So that provision of field guides hugely changed the science and the number of people that knew about how to identify things, and that's made a real difference. Or just as another example, there's a few, I can remember as a child identifying dragonflies, and it was really hard, but then Hammond's book came out, and Hammond's book is pretty good, not great, but pretty good. As a result of that, lots of people started identifying dragonflies and learned lots of new techniques. And then we started getting really good field guides like this. Lots of bird watchers became interested in identifying dragonflies, and it was hugely improved. And we've learned enormous amount more about dragonflies just as a consequence of having that book. And you can see the problems. If you look at our wasps, we don't have a guide to wasps. We don't even have a key to wasps. We don't really have anything sensible on earthworms. So we don't really have much monitoring on science on these, because there isn't the basic stage of being able to identify them. There are some other solutions to this. The solution, I personally hate keys. You know, if a typical key, it says, you know, slightly hairy armpits or something. And you think, well, there's one hair in it. Does that count? Is that slightly hairy or not? You know, and it says purplish sheen. You think, well, that's a bit reddish. Is that purplish? And yeah, you don't know. Multi-axis keys are fantastic. So here's something called Discover Life that's trying to produce industrial scale multi-axis keys. And here's their one for American ants, of which there are 834 kinds. I guess that's species. And here are the questions. And as I said, the problem with a normal key is you've got to answer all the questions. And I looked at one botanical key, and the first question is it an annual or a perennial? You have to be pretty patient to find out. So if you're not patient enough to wait to see if it's an annual or perennial, or it isn't obvious, you know, sometimes it is obvious, you just miss that out and you go to the next one. So I've just randomly ticked it has 10 segments and it has 2 spines on its thorax, and then you press the button that says simplify, and it says you've now got 19 kinds, tells you what they are in case you want to have a look, but it tells you the questions that if answered will make most difference. And it might be that you know a bit about ants and know what genera or subfamily it is, but if not, you might go to each one of these, and then you just press and simplify, and you just keep going till you get to what seems to be the right answer. And that seems to be an enormously advantageous way of working. Amongst other things, it democratizes the process, because basically this is just a big table of species against characters. And if you have that, then you can add your own characters or your own species information, and you can debate about it, and you can change it. The way we have at the moment with keys is in many taxa, every 50 years someone produces their key, and that's it for the next 50 years. You're stuck with that person's idiosyncrasies and errors. Here you can just keep improving it. Another issue is iSpot, which BS puts a little bit of money in, and Jonathan Silverton's very much pushed this. This is just to warm the cockles of your heart. There's a South African iSpot. Someone said, I've just got some kids in my hospital that have eaten these. 35 seconds later, they say, we think it's a physic nut tree, which is toxic, and other people say we agree with this. And then the next day, the doctor says, thanks. And the kids recovered and were fine. So it's a very effective way of using the community to identify species. Next identification method I talk about, you all know on Facebook there's image recognition. Presumably we're going to use that a lot for individual and species recognition. There's some work on individual recognition. There's a penguin application whereby they can identify individual penguins automatically. I've got something on my phone that you can put a leaf in front of it and photograph it, and it usually doesn't tell you what it is. But presumably that will change, and it'll just get, you know, if it can tell that this is Jane Dock, I'm sure it'll soon be able to say this is a beech tree rather than it normally says it's a holly or something completely different. Anyway, it'll get better. So I'm sure image recognition is going to be a really important tool. When I was at the University of East Anglia, one of my most exciting days was the cleaner came in with this bat found in the halls of residence. And I thought, it'd be a pipistrelle or a long-eared. And I had a look at it and I almost fell off my chair. It was this thing here, a barbastelle bat. And barbastelle bats were mythically rare. You know, no one knew anything about it. And we told the museum, and people came from Essex all the way down here and came from Cambridgeshire to see this bat because it was so scarce. With the BTO and Stuart Newson, they've now set up an automated bat recording scheme. And it turns out that barbastelle bats are all over the place. I set it up. I live in Suffolk, around here somewhere. And we got 220 recordings of bobostel bat on the local heath next to where I live. It could have been one bat just flying round and round and round, but it certainly seems that it's very abundant. So that technology has changed the abundance of records and enormously changed the amount of information we have. I'm just going to whiz through a couple of other ways we have of increasing our data sets. Metabarcoding, now if you're in the future, if you're a naturalist, you only need 2 bits of equipment. You need a sweep net to collect lots of samples and a liquidizer to sort of liquidize it all and then send it off and have your community identified. This is may well radically improve our ability to characterize complex communities. Environmental DNA, we can now take samples of water and work out which fish live there, where great crested newts are, even which mammals have briefly visited that water body. Robots, we're having robots now. Robots can plant and weed and pick. They can identify weeds and spray them with fertilizer. They can remember yield and weeds, etc. I wonder soon, rather than people going out in the field, if we're going to send our robots out in order to do our sampling. And then more so still, we've got drones out. So are we going to do our sampling? At the moment, we need naturalists to go and place the bat recorder on the heath and the woods, or take the water sample. We're just going to send our drones out to go and collect our samples to identify bird song and bats and things in the wider countryside. So what I want to do is to say we're facing this revolution. There are all these new methods of monitoring. We can face enormous amounts of extra data. What would the consequences of that be? There are big problems with current data collection. One of which is we know where species are. So this is Harlequin's ladybird all over southern England and spreading north, and that's probably about right. But is it here is it not here because it's not there, or because no one's looked at it? You can't distinguish absence from lack of monitoring. Of course, with these new methods, you increasingly can. You can see where people have been. You can see what other records they are. You can have a look at that. Similarly, if you look at for the most diverse part of Britain, it's this garden here. And it's not because it's particularly good, it's because Jennifer Owen has identified anything that goes anywhere near it and has a huge species list. And that's, of course, the common problem. We can't distinguish effort from abundance. And, of course, with these methods, you can. There's all sorts of more sophisticated ways in which you can work out how much time people have spent, what their expertise is. Quality of records. When it comes to records, this is as high as you get. This is a skin specimen of a Sabine's gull on the west coast of America. The records, the skin is in a museum. This is as high quality as you can get. Or here's a slender-billed curlew seen in Northumberland. This was discussed more than any other bird record, considered more than any other, and accepted. So this is the highest quality record that you can get. The only problems are that people have been back and looked and they've learned more about other species of other races of curlew or whatever, and they've decided after all that isn't a slender-billed curlew. And this bird was in the collection of Colonel Meinertzhagen, who you may well know had the amusing habit of stealing skins from other people and then labeling them with his own fictitious data sets. So that was a fraud too. The point I'm going to make is that almost no data is absolutely certain. And we tend to view records as right or wrong. And I think we probably want to view everything as having a certain amount of uncertainty with it. And I think that very much changes how you view records. And with large data sets, you can start to do it. So for example, if I told you, what do you think of that as a collection of birds in my garden, Rob?
Not that.
What about this collection of birds in my back garden?
They could to be a couple of misidentifications there.
Yeah, well, so do you believe that fire crest in that record?
Might be a gold crest.
What's a fire crest? Do you believe that fire crest?
No.
No, exactly, yeah. So the point I'm making is that by looking at the entire list, you can see something about the probabilities of these records being right, and then that can tell you about the probability of identification and the probability of this fire crest almost certainly being wrong, unlike this fire crest, which was seen by a skilled observer and is indisputably correct. And you can then evaluate the quality of records, the likelihood of a species being identified, the likelihood of an individual identifying a species correctly. Here's a bit of news. Shallow magnitude 4.7 earthquake was reported Monday morning 5 miles from Westwood, California, according to the US Geological Survey. The trembler occurred at 6:25 a.m. Pacific time at a depth of 5 miles. According to the US Geological Survey, the epicenter was... That's pretty good. It was written by a computer and put online 3 minutes after the earthquake. And most of the delay, as I understand it, was waking up the scientist for him to check that this was all right before it went online. So that is computer-generated text. This is for sales products, for sales information for large franchises. They often put that information up as tables, and no one ever looks at it. What they're doing now is sending it as computer-generated text, where it just takes that information and makes it available in a readable way and just tells them what's going on. And this is becoming very common. It's very common for a lot of sports reporting in the United States to be computer-generated text. It's a game that between some colleges, fairly small scale, can't afford to send a reporter there, but people still like to read a record of it. You just take the data, you have it so it pulls out the story, and it then generates text as a news piece. And there are now hundreds of thousands of articles written that way. We're going to see a lot more of it. So I found a polecat on the A505 at Duxford, and experts tell me that they believe it's a polecat over here. And it's a very good record for Cambridge. So I submitted it to NBN. Dear Bill, thank you very much for submitting your record of a female adult polecat on the 3rd of November. There have been 11 previous records, the first being seen, 3 of the review, etc. This is great, exactly the sort of response I want. Although the response I actually got was, thank you for submitting your data. But supposing I had got that, supposing it did feedback, supposing it said, have you checked that, have you made sure it's not a feral polecat because of this? Have you submitted it? I gave it to the Cambridge Museum. Have you submitted that record here? Supposing for school parties filling the Big Garden Birdwatch, they got the feedback on the species they'd seen and the conservation. You can provide that sort of individual feedback with computer-generated text. And I think that's a really important thing that should be done as a way of motivating people. I don't know if you read this. This is the 2007 to 2012 outlook for tufted washable scatter rugs, bath mats and sets that measure 6 foot by 9 foot or smaller in India. It's only £595, but you do get free delivery. This is one of the 200,000 books that this person has written, computer generated. And he says that if he sells one, he's made a big profit because it is so cheap to produce. So he set up this algorithm that will sell. I'm not sure this is a bestseller. That will pull material and then convert it into reports. And imagine that we could do that. Imagine that we could then have our text, our data sets, and then generate reports. This is your annual birdwatching report. This is the birdwatching report for your local reserve, your local city, your local area. There's all sorts of material that you could do, and it might even be even more exciting than this book here, and perhaps cheaper. This technology is making this really feasible. BirdTrack, great system, and a lot of it is by the enthusiasm of individuals that just want to go out and collect data because it's fun. One of the things we could do is we could then start identifying the skills of particular observers in the way that Tesco's does. Tesco's has a good understanding of you as a shopper. You probably, I don't know if you shop at Tesco's and have the Tesco's card, it then sells you vouchers, and it's clear from the vouchers you get that it knows who you are and why it's trying to tempt you, and it's not a random set of items. They really understand you. And we could do the same, that if we have people submitting records, you can understand where they are, what they know about, how reliable they are, and then start targeting them, start encouraging them. Rather than just saying, why don't you collect data at random, why don't we then start giving them particular tasks? So you could have old records in relation to where you are. It could say, I know that you know about lichens, and I know you're slightly east of central London at the moment. On your way back to King's Cross, why don't you go at this churchyard where there's this lichen once recorded and see if it's still there. It could be used for monitoring changes in sites. So you want to make sure there's routine monitoring in these sites. You notice that no one has been there for the last couple of years. Let's go and check if that species is still present in that site. And I see this as all being automated. Someone could have a research project. They want to look at a particular problem, and then you fit that into the algorithm and say, we want to look at this particular issue. Let's have people going and collecting data. You could look at things like in relation to climate change. We could have it so that it would identify specific species. So Rob may well have done this too. We had a colleague who was obsessed by aphids, and he said to me, why don't you go and look at the mullein aphid, and it's bright yellow and it's got black exhaust pipes. And I went in my garden and looked, and there it was. And yeah, great. We could send that out to people. We could say, this is clearly identifiable. There's no doubt about it. Why don't you then go and look for these readily identifiable taxa, even though they're obscure? And there's no way I'd identify most aphids. And you could encourage more systematic coverage. You could say, well, you could just go to the Norfolk coast and join the crowds. But if you went to this square here, there's no butterfly being recorded there for the last 5 years. So why don't you do some really useful recording instead and see if you can just tempt people that way. We can then link that to what you can do. So we've got this conservation evidence site. So the great bird facts database to tell you about skylarks, and it then automatically tells you what we know about how to conserve them from the conservation evidence database. So we have the problem that field naturalists are going to not have an obvious function, because a lot of these things are going to be automated. We can automate our bat detection, our identification, our monitoring. What then is it useful for biologists to be doing? And it seems to me there's lots of things they could do. They could look a lot more at the ecology. So what eats what? So on iSpot, now if you put in black poplar, it'll tell you the species that will eat it. We could have a lot more of that sort of natural history, a lot more recording of behavior and ecology and success and so on. One of the challenges we have in monitoring change is that the changes that have taken place are missed by the monitoring systems we have. So we have this big decline in farmland birds, and it's kind of a bit hard to understand a lot of it, because it's due to things like the change in sowing from spring to autumn, and that wasn't in the databases. And there could be all sorts of monitoring that could take place of the environment that could monitor features that you can't get from data from space, from elsewhere. And then what we really want to do is put all that data on a platform with the other environmental data, whole set of models. We really want to put everything together so you can run it with a common set of tools. That must be the vision we have. That's something that we should be thinking about how to achieve. And there's a number of platforms. I'm going to show 3. There's IPBES, and there's the EU BOM platform, and there was the NERC's Earth Observation Network platform. So various people are trying it. I'm not sure we've quite got it right, but that's really where we want to be in the future. There are lots of things that we should be monitoring but aren't. It's amazing we know nothing about earthworms or invasives. We don't monitor a mycorrhiza. Surely there's some way of monitoring mycorrhiza we could be doing. We don't monitor many environmental variables like nanoparticles. We should really be thinking about what we want to monitor for the problems in the future and how we're going to achieve that. And then the technology must surely change. This is mind-bogglingly clumsy set of equipment. You see something and you look through your binoculars, then you take that down and you look through that and you lift that up and photograph that, and then you identify it by taking the field guide out that's in there. Surely in the fairly near future all of that's going to be integrated into one system that will identify it and photograph it and download it all simultaneously, and you won't take all that glass in the field. Okay, so pulling this together, how might monitoring look in the future? So we're going to have different means of locating it. We'll have clones, we'll have robots, we'll be looking at DNA. We'll have different means of recognizing, apps, digital, multi-access keys, crowdsourcing. We will then have it so that goes on to my personal means of recording. So I'm contributing to the data set, but it will tell me my diary, my records in the way I want it. So it's in my interest to store it. It will then assess it according to how much it believes it, how much trust it gives in every single record. You record associated information, where you were, weather data from your digital mobile device, etc. Identification will become so much easier. You'll start recording other data, where it is, what is it doing, what's it's feeding on, etc. You'll then have feedback. It'll then tell you with automated text what's a particularly exciting record, what you've seen that year, what other people have seen in that area, all those sorts of things. We'll then go into big databases. We'll then go on platforms in which the monitoring data will go with the other environmental data and a set of models so you can analyze it. You can then have decision support systems, etc. And we can then use that for decision making and for understanding science. So it seems to me that we're in an exciting position. The world is changing quite radically, but I'm not sure we really thought about what the full potentials are, and especially how we're going to tie all of this together and use this in innovative ways so that we can then make the most of this exciting revolution that's happening. But I look forward to hearing more, and I look forward to reading lots of papers about it in Methods in Ecology and Evolution. Thank you.
Bill, thanks. That was a great talk. I wonder if you have any thoughts on the relative merits of the sort of large-scale, crowdsourced data collection like this, which you might have lots and lots of records, but they might be of relatively poor quality, perhaps, versus perhaps more structured, directed fieldwork that we might consider monitoring to be today.
I'm sure we need both. There will be occasions where, as academics, we'll often go out and collect that structured field data. I think the core of what I'm saying is that there's a hybrid. There's a hybrid. At the moment we say, oh, these are people we trust because I know them and met them or whatever. We can evaluate how much we trust them by the veracity of the records they're submitting, and we can encourage them to behave in a more structured way. So I think it's not a sort of let's just have everything, or let's have a small number of people out with a very targeted scheme. We can have some sort of messy intermediate, and I think there's fantastic opportunities there. The BTO is extremely good at They're on the right-hand side, the more pretty structured, but you can imagine a sort of a slightly looser version of that.
One question I've got is, you talked a lot about monitoring diversity and identification. The system we've got for naming organisms is about 300 years old, and it has a problem that taxonomists are forever naming, renaming species. And one analysis, we were looking at 11,000 species of grasses which had 66,000 different names. There's a real challenge in actually linking up what you've seen to what's on kind of on record. I mean, how do we take that forward?
Ooh, I don't know. Put less money in taxonomy. Joke. I could see that you could have something rather like we have for publications. This is the DOI, a unique way of flagging up what that is. So regardless of what taxonomists do, it will stay with that number. But I'm not sure about what else you do. It is a deeply serious problem.
Yeah, no, I've got no idea either.
Anyone got any bright ideas? Well, it looks like we're going to have that problem for another 300 years.
On that bombshell, we say thank you to Bill for his talk. So thanks again.